Evening. My name is Jay Rothman, and welcome to Real Men Replay. But I wanted to take a moment here to introduce you and allow you actually to introduce yourself rather than me give you the bio. Why don't you share a little bit about your background and why you were invited on this show this evening?
Hi, Jay. Hi, everybody who is joining in. Thanks for coming tonight. It's great to be able to talk with Jay. We've been talking already. We've had a couple of wonderful talks, and we couldn't wait to bring you in on it. So I've been a psychologist for over 40 years. My whole career has been dedicated to the study of psychological and spiritual well-being. The whole notion of mental illness and as being the focus of study did not make as much sense to me as focusing on the innate capacity of every person, every human being to have well-being. So I had been studying for 10 years and I was fortunate enough to come across a man who had had an enlightenment experience. And he had some profound insights into the very nature of the human, of how humans work and their true nature. And it immediately captured my attention. It changed my work dramatically as a psychologist. I began to get far better results in a fraction of the time. And the results were more lasting. So ever since that happened in 1986, I have been traveling the world, giving seminars in psychological and spiritual well-being. And I was in California doing a seminar, and Jay came, and we met there, and we hit it off right away. So it's great to be here, Jay. Thanks.
Thank you for sharing that little bit with me. I'd like to just expand on a little bit how we met. I had the opportunity. I met someone randomly who owned a restaurant in at Culver City at the time, and she happened to be serving us behind the counter, and somehow, like most of my conversations, navigate from placing an order to learning more about their life and sharing our story. And somehow we stumbled upon the fact that she had had exposure to something called the three principles. And she went on to share that her mom and dad, her dad is he's one of the, I guess, gurus behind the paleo diet.
Yes.
He's well known in the industry. He's got a magazine I know the grocery store shelves, front and center.
Yeah.
In any event, she said, you know, my mom and dad host a weekend seminar, weekend retreat at our home, and we have one coming up. You ought to check out these three principles because it really changed my life. And I'm talking about Devin. I don't know if you recall meeting the young beautiful Devin.
Yes.
And so we went home, of course, and started Googling the three principles, and I found it really difficult. And all the time I invested in YouTube, really honing in to listen with everyone that spoke about the three principles, I had a really hard time hearing anyone really to say what the three principles were. It was almost like it was the unspoken language within the three principles. What are those three principles? And because I couldn't really get the answers that I wanted, it's like, I guess I gotta sign up and I gotta show up. And I remember it like it was yesterday. We got there a little early. It was in a beautiful home in Malibu, and we went out in the backyard, and you were just I think you were just in a moment enjoying the beautiful nature that was present. And you walked over to Mary and I and you introduced yourself to us. And, you know, as soon as you opened your mouth and the words started to flow, I knew in that moment that it was going to be a beautiful weekend. I just knew. And you didn't let me down. There were I believe, two other moderators, teachers there. There was Rohini and there was Barbara. And although I love those women and I love what they had to say, you were the star for me. You were the person that just what you spoke, the words resonated with me. It made sense, even though at times I was confused, but I was able to understand the basic foundation of the three principles. And from there, the rest is history. I bought your book. I've got it right here. I bought your book. It's called Coming Home. And I bought it that weekend, and I spent a lot of time over a long period of time reading it because I just didn't want it to be a marathon. I wanted to really understand what I was reading. And so through that whole experience, you and I have stayed in touch. And when I've been sometimes conflicted by some things that I hear on other, let's say, shows or YouTube videos of other teachers and mentors of the three principles, I have reached out to you. And one thing about you, you've always been so responsive and so available. And I thank you for that, because you have been a part of my healing journey in my own life. And I so appreciate you for that. And you make it easy because I absolutely love you. You know, you're so lovable. You're like that teddy bear. So in any event, that's a background. And I thought it would be, you know, actually it was suggested to invite you on a show. And I was like, I don't know. I just can't imagine that Dicken's going to say yes to me. And finally I had the courage to ask. And you said, well, I'm busy the month of August. I'm traveling a lot, but I can do it in September. And so here we are. And so I thank you for being here, for believing in me and my platform and the program that I put together, that you are willing to come on and invest the time. And so what I'd like to ask you to do, you know, one of the things I read right now, what blew me away is that you and your, I believe, only wife or current wife have been married since 1969, which is 49 years.
Yeah. 49.
And when you started out, you shared in some of the work I've listened to, you were a highly educated man. You got a degree. You furthered your education, and you became a psychologist. And what I learned from you in my time we spent together was that although you were a practicing psychologist and you did that for, I believe, over 30 years, you yourself were still struggling. You wanted answers that you weren't finding. And I remember you sharing that at one point you were meditating. Well, why don't you tell that part of the story? Before you found the three principles, how long were you meditating for on an average day, and why?
A long time, 4 hours.
Exactly.
I'd get up at 4 a.m, meditate until 6. I'd meditate from 12 to 1. I would meditate again 10 to 12, usually. And I had 2 small kids and a lovely wife, so I wanted to do that when I could. It wouldn't interfere with our family time. But I was a seeker, Jay. Everything in psychology, and almost everything in spiritual teaching promises that if you do certain things, you can develop your well-being. In other words, how you are at this moment isn't good enough, and you can always feel better. So you have to learn to do certain things so that you're able to feel better. So I was a seeker, and I read voraciously. I studied voraciously. I went to tons of workshops. I would go to meditation retreats, 3 weeks of silence at a time. And it was a lot of hard work, which I thought was necessary to develop my well-being. I trained myself to wake up at the end of REM sleep, so I would be able to capture in full detail each of the 5 dreams I had every night. So I would, with flashlight and pen, write down in detail every dream I had all night long, so I could work on them the next day. I did affirmations. I had an affirmation notebook. I had a cognitive psychology notebook that captured my thought content and tried to reframe it to a more positive content. I had structured journals, I had unstructured journals. There was no end to it. My wife at that point said, Dicken, I've never met anybody in my life who works harder on themselves than you do. And I honestly took that as a compliment. I said, oh, thank you. Thank you very much. And
In retrospect, do you think that it was a compliment?
yes and no. It's a two-edged compliment at that time because I was obsessed with my own self-improvement. So it was my priority. I was paying more attention to myself than being fully engaged in the moment in life. Now that was just me, Jay. This is not a comment about anybody else's journey or anybody else's trip, but all I can say is I was working really hard to develop well-being, and then I met this man, Sydney Banks, who was a guy from Scotland with a 9th grade education, who was a welder. And he had had this enlightenment experience, and his teaching was every human being already has perfect well-being at core. Perfect. And the only thing that happens, it gets covered over with our personal thinking. And when we get caught up in and identified with our personal thinking and feeling, that's what he called ego. And when we're caught up in ego, it seems like our well-being is not present. So we go looking for it on the outside. And as you begin to realize that it's always present, it's always here, you already have it, you can't not have it, it's our very nature. It's a formless energy at our very core, so it can't be damaged, it can't be destroyed, it can't be lost, it can't be hurt. It's our essence, it's our soul, it's our being. And as human beings, it's our true nature. And when I heard that, I had a huge insight. My insight was, oh my God, I already have it. That means if I just relax out of my personal thinking, it'll show up. And I stopped thinking about everything. My personal mind just, if you will, it just stopped. Full stop. In other words, I was no longer engaged in my computer at all. I wasn't interested in spiritual ideas or beliefs. I wasn't interested in thinking about what Sid was saying. I wasn't interested in anything. I just stopped and I metaphorically fell out of my personal thinking. And right away, there was a nice feeling. I didn't have to wait. I didn't have to work. I didn't have to develop. That the moment I stopped searching, well-being began to appear. I felt better. And as I've learned since then, the quality of my thinking improves. It becomes more creative, more responsive, wiser, more common sense. And it's given freely to any human being at any moment that there's space and personal thought so that that light of being can shine through. That inner well-being can shine through. So all of us have this well of being, and the living waters of life are found at the core of that well, and they're always there. They're already there. That we don't have to develop ourselves as damaged goods or as lacking essence or as lacking well-being. And that was a radical proposition for me, for psychology. It emphasized the critical nature of the role thought plays in either obscuring or uncovering and revealing our true nature. That well-being has nothing to do with our circumstance. You could be in a horrific circumstance, and in a moment of clarity and open receptivity, our well-being will guide us toward dealing well with that moment, with that circumstance, with whatever is going on. So I was very excited. This really, I stopped searching. I came home and I stopped formally. I say what?
How did you find Sydney? Like, just was it random?
I found a book in the bookstore that was written by somebody that had been deeply influenced by Sid Banks, a man named Dr. Roger Mills. He was an astrophysicist who went into community psychology. He was given a grant by the National Mental Health Association to find out why people were healthy and how they got there. And a friend of his tipped him off about Sid and said, you got to hear this guy. He's different than anybody else you've heard. And there's no technique and there's no practice. And people listen to him and they walk away. And if they have insight into what he's talking about, they walk away with greater well-being or greater experience of their innate natural well-being. And
Now, let me ask you this: if you're anything like most people, thoughts keep coming. They keep coming.
Yeah.
How do we slow them down, or how do we turn them off in the moment when we're in it?
We don't. It's impossible. It would be like saying, how do I stop the river from flowing? Here's a metaphor, Jay. Trying to stop your thinking takes a lot of thinking. You have to think about what to do and how to do it, and you got to do some kind of effort or practice or technique. It would be like going to the ocean when the waves are rough and saying, okay, my job is to make the ocean calm, so I'm going to stop these waves. And you're out there with a tennis racket whacking on the waves trying to get them flat. That's what I used to do. I used to spend lots of time trying to get my mind to be quiet. Now, there's another aspect. Say you're in the ocean, the water is really rough, it's loud, it's turbulent, you're getting thrown all around the place. Without trying to stop the waves or the turbulence, you go 1 foot deeper in the ocean. It's quiet. You go 10 feet deeper. It's even quiet still. So I didn't know that within me already was stillness and silence, always, in every moment. And that all day long, people disengage from their thinking and get present and touch to a deeper level this stillness, which always comes with a nice feeling. Otherwise, people would never be happy or joyful or enjoy life or enjoy doing things. If people think about what they enjoy doing. Those are moments when we've fallen out of our personal thinking into the now. And then well-being reveals itself as enjoyment. I just didn't know that was available 24/7, no matter what circumstance I was in. I thought it was circumstantial. I thought I felt good because I was on the beach, or it was a sunny day, or I was with a friend. And then if I didn't feel good, I thought that was because of circumstance. Well, my wife just said that thing to me. That's why I'm not feeling good. Or I haven't been able to do what I want to do. Or I have so much work, I'm all stressed out. And I started seeing that it didn't matter what my circumstance was. I was living in the world of thought and experiencing my own thinking. And when I fell into the now, no matter what I was experiencing, I started to feel more presence, and then more clarity, and then more peace, and then more whatever well-being brought me that was appropriate to that moment. If there was a tiger there, it would bring me determination and courage. If someone was about to hit me over the head with a baseball bat, it would bring me such clarity and wisdom. I would know exactly which way to move and how to do that. I played sports my whole life growing up, and soccer or football was my favorite game. And we understood that if you were caught up in your thinking, you couldn't experience the now and you couldn't enjoy the game that you were playing. So coaches would say, your head's not in the game, Bettinger. You got to get your head in the game. That just means you have to fall out of your personal thinking. And whenever people fall out of their personal thinking, a deeper wisdom starts guiding them. A deeper wisdom is available to people when their minds are open, clear, and receptive. It helps people deal with any circumstance more wisely. Any circumstance. And I've been in circumstance where I've had machine guns in my chest and bombs going off all around me. And I walked into a war zone. I was on vacation and I was literally in danger of my life for about at least a week. I didn't think I was going to live through it.
Hmm.
And every time my head would clear, I would know what to do next in that moment. And it helped me navigate through this absolute insanity going on around me. This was in the middle of Peru. So
Speaking of Peru, do you have any sense of how many countries you have visited, toured, not so much from a vacation perspective, but just from sharing the teachings of the three principles in Sydney Banks?
well, certainly all over the United States. And I think it's been about 10 different countries in Jerusalem, in Prague, all over Scandinavia, all over Europe. I've been very, very fortunate. And people are very, very hungry to hear this message. That there are things that if people have insight about, they relax into themselves as they are and discover an innate well-being that's always been there.
Of all the countries you visited, is there one in particular that you feel perhaps they embraced, or the people that you worked with, that you spoke
Yeah.
to, got it quicker than others?
Yeah, I was most surprised. They may not have gotten it quicker, but they were the most. It was the most appreciative audience I had ever come across. Is the one in Prague in the Czech Republic,
Hmm.
and it's only recently that they've discovered political freedom, things we take for granted, and this whole notion of psychological or spiritual freedom is so foreign. I mean, I was on a train in the Czech Republic with my friends and we were laughing and we got scolded for laughing in public.
Wow.
Scolded. I mean, a man stood up and shook his finger at us like we were little kids doing something absolutely horrible. Um, there were 65 people who came to the seminar. 60 people were from Czech Republic and had never heard of the three principles before. They were very curious about psychological well-being because it's such a foreign notion. And 5 people were from Europe who had come over to hear me talk. And I was talking, I had an interpreter on stage. And for the first morning, everybody in the audience looked down very sternly and had their arms crossed. And I'm pretty lively when I present, and every once in a while I'd say something funny, and the 5 people from Europe would laugh and laugh, and there would not be a single smile or laugh out of the Czech audience. I'm going, whoa. I had no idea what was getting in or what was getting through. By the afternoon of day 1, all the arms were uncrossed and people were really paying attention and listening deeply and leaning forward. And by the next morning, almost everybody had their hands in the air, almost in their own surprise, to share something they were seeing or to ask a really wonderful question. By afternoon of day 2, everybody was either laughing or happy crying or hugging each other. And at the end of the program, they stood up and gave a standing ovation that went on and on and on. It was well over 10 minutes. And it wasn't, I didn't feel like it was standing ovation for me. I think it was standing ovation that they experienced a level of well-being they didn't know was possible, or that they hadn't experienced since they were little kids and didn't think adults living in society could experience that level of enjoyment and love of life, happiness.
So could you do me a favor right now, right here, right now, for the guests that are on? By the way, if you're live, thank you for joining the show tonight. We've got Dicken Bettinger on in the studio sharing all about the 3 principles. I'd like to ask you if you could pull one nugget that you recall from that experience that you shared with them that you believe may have had the most profound impact on their experience in that moment. What is it that you conveyed or that you said that resonated with them, that allowed them to open their thoughts and their minds to considering that just maybe there's another way?
I'm going to pick 2 things instead of just one, 2 nuggets. One was certainly no exception, already has perfect well-being. Nobody's broken. Nobody needs fixing psychologically. We're perfect as we are, but for our thinking that says we're not perfect, we're missing something, we're lacking something. Those are just ideas that are made up, that are arbitrary. So the second point, I talked with them a lot about the power of thought to create every moment of our experience. The power of thought is the energy of life that knows how to create mental activity, that knows how to bring us, as you said earlier, a constant flow of thought 24/7. Without that flow of thought, we wouldn't be alive. Without that flow of thought, we wouldn't experience anything from agony to ecstasy. We are thinkers. We live in a world of thought from the moment we're born until we die. Now, here's the thing, Jay. This is what's been missing in psychology and that people have misunderstood for centuries that's caused so much psychological suffering. Every thought that is created immediately shows up as a feeling. We're always feeling our own thinking in the moment. It's the sole source of what we feel. You have a sad thought created in your head, you're going to feel sad. That's normal. That's healthy. You have a happy thought, you feel happy. You have an angry thought, you feel angry. You have a stressful thought, you feel stress, and on and on. It's 1-to-1. It's like saying 2 + 2 = 4. It's mathematical. It's scientific now that whatever we think, we experience. If we don't think it, we don't experience it. Now, a lot of our mental activity is not visible. Verbal thinking is such a small percentage of mental activity. It takes thought for me to move my hand. Do I know what thoughts I'm having to move my hand? I don't have a clue. I don't have a clue, but I know that the creation of mental activity is a requirement for me to have an experience. I have to have a thought to have an experience. Now, that's what Sid Banks kept pointing toward over and over again. We live in the experience of our own thinking. And he said that's the one thing people don't know, because now I've traveled the world. I've literally asked tens of thousands of people, what kind of feelings do you have? What kind of feelings are you experiencing? What's going on in your life, and what kind of feelings are associated for you with that? And so I've heard as you can imagine, the absolute full range of human experience, human feelings. And then I've asked people, this is the clincher. Where do you think your feelings come from? I've never once had people say, well, that's obvious. It's created from thought. They'll say, I'm feeling this way because, and then people will point towards something in the world that they think has caused them to feel that way.
And for a lot of people, it's blame.
It's blaming something other than thought, innocently. It's all innocent.
Right.
We all do it at times. Nobody's perfect. We all do this at times, but that's when we have difficulties psychologically. So, for example, when I was sitting there in my very first class for the 3 principles, I told you I was enormously hit by this notion that I already have what I'm searching for. It's my nature. That blew me away. But when I heard Sid say, you can't have a feeling without thought. Whatever you're thinking, you will feel. The power of thought that creates life, that creates the trees, that creates the planet, that creates the mental activity going on in your head, which is a constant moving flow of electrical chemical activity. That's where our feelings come from. It's simultaneous. So I just considered this. I would never ask anybody to take my word for it. Just consider this. Okay, so I go back to my hotel room and I'm going, yeah. Thought creates your experience. What's the big deal? And then I started thinking about stuff I had coming up the next week. And I'm thinking about it and thinking about it. And all of a sudden I notice I'm anxious. I was at that time, 10 years as a psychologist, I was still quite a worrier. In other words, I was good at thinking about things in a way that made me anxious. So I'd always be thinking about, oh, how am I going to do? How am I doing? What can I do? How's this talk going to go? And I'd get nervous. I had no idea that I was thinking that up. Jay, I had no idea. If you asked me, why are you nervous? I said, well, I have a talk to give. See, I'd blame it on having to give a talk. You say, of course, anybody would get nervous who has to give a talk. Well, that's not true. You say, well, anybody would feel stress who has a lot of work to do. That's not true. A lot of people have tons of work to do. They're not experiencing stress. If it's not in our thinking, it's not in our experience. So I caught myself in the hotel room worrying, thinking up the future, which was like, oh my God, how am I going to deal with it? What am I going to say? I got to figure it out. And I would spend a lot of time thinking about the future. Some people spend a lot of time thinking about the past. That kind of thinking tends to generate feelings of tension or stress or upset. When I realized I was thinking that up, here's what happened. This is cool, Jay. I just stopped thinking about it. The thoughts are still going on. I'm not trying to control my thinking. I'm not trying to stop them. I don't care what they do. They can do whatever they want to do. They can have a party. I'm just not in the party anymore. It's called being.
Is that about the awareness? Once you had the awareness that you were, what I refer to as future tripping.
Yes.
You're anticipating something that hasn't happened yet. So it's a trip, it's in the future.
Yeah.
But once you had the awareness that you were in those thoughts, is it about having the awareness that you're able to kind of eat your way out of those thoughts, or do you distract yourself by doing something else? Like, again, how do you get out of that space?
Yes. Here's a metaphor. Somebody comes to see me, they're hitting themselves on the head with a hammer. And they say, I have a terrible headache. And I say to them, why do you think you have a headache? Seems pretty obvious to me, right? Why do you think you have a headache? And they say, oh, this person I'm living with is just giving me the hardest time ever. I'm just so pissed off. I can't believe that they're... And I say, oh, I can understand you're being pissed off, but what about the hammer? The instant the person is aware that the pain in their head is connected to the hammer, they don't need a technique. They don't need anybody to tell them what to do. It's just natural response. You put the hammer down. This is what I'm seeing with my clients. If people really see that they're thinking up an experience, it wakes them back up to the now. You go, oh my God, why would I keep thinking about this? I can, I'm a free thinker. I could keep thinking about this for 24 hours if I wanted to, but I'll keep feeling it because I keep creating that feeling in my thinking. And it's built into human nature to let go of anything you know is creating pain. Like if I put something in your hand that was too hot, you just let go of it. It's not technique. You would need to study. You would need to take a course in how do I open my hand when I hold something hot into us. When we're not aware that our feelings are created from thought, we keep thinking. It's that simple. It's that simple. And I was doing so much thinking that wasn't necessary. And I started catching myself thinking up angry, thinking up sad, thinking up guilt. Now, those are all normal feelings. There's nothing wrong with any of those feelings. But there's a difference between feeling it like little kids feel it, where it just flows through, and feeling it like we as adults often do, which is we grab onto it and keep thinking about it forever, and then we suffer. I love watching my grandkids. They have all the same thoughts and feelings I do, but they don't hold any of them. They flow. That's healthy functioning. It's just flowing. We're living in the flow of life. The feelings come and go, and when that happens, people get over upset very quickly, which is what we call in psychology resilience. Every human being is already resilient. It's this misunderstanding that keeps us caught up in thought, which all of a sudden we're not as resilient as we used to be as kids. But as you understand that, you become more and more like a kid again. So an angry thought comes into your head, and it doesn't mean anything unless you grab onto it and start thinking about it, which we're free to do. And if you don't grab onto it, it flows right through, you get over it, you come back to clarity, and you have all the clarity and common sense you need to deal with whatever horrible thing just happened.
How does this work for those that suffer with, that have suffered with mental health? For example, depression or anxiety, or those are the first two that come to mind. But of course, there's so many other mental health disorders.
Yeah.
Have these three principles help?
Oh, absolutely. I can't imagine. It has the potential for helping anybody because we all work the same way. We all think and have experience. We all are aware beings, so we can become aware of that fact. We all are connected to a deeper core of well-being and wisdom. So we all work the same way, regardless of what labels have been put on us. So here's what I've noticed. You take anybody who is suffering psychologically, I guarantee you, they're caught up in a thought and think it's true. That's mental illness. They're caught up in a thought and think it's true. I have seen no exceptions to that, Jay.
Well, isn't part of that challenge that you're then labeled also with that disorder? Oh, you have depression. Oh, yes. You have anxiety.
Yes. So I say, oh, you have thoughts like anybody else. Oh, if you get caught up in thoughts, it keeps it alive, just like me. And I did that this morning, right? It's just a human thing. We have free will. We're free thinkers. We can think about things in a way that keeps alive our painful feelings. I have a friend who's a psychiatrist. He says people with depression spend about 90% of the day thinking really negative thoughts and thinking that they're true. When it goes down to 50%, they're a different person. When it goes down to 40%, wow, they're just enjoying life again. When it goes down to 30%, they're just full of life and creativity. Shall I tell a story?
I was waiting for that moment. Dicken is probably one of the best storytellers I've ever
seen. This is an interesting story. Yeah, this is a woman, and she was a firefighter. And she had a bad back, and so she was having difficulty working. And she had long-standing depression, and many times in her life had been suicidal. And so she wasn't able to work, which often kept her mind off of herself, which allowed her a greater sense of well-being while she was working. Her depression would recede or fall away. But she was just sitting home all day long, thinking, caught up in very painful thinking. She calls me up and says, I've heard about your program, and I am only calling you up to please my mother, because she thinks that what you teach, it could make a difference, but I can't imagine it could make a difference. She said, I'll tell you what, I'm willing to come up and give your program a try, which was just 4 days. Be with me for 4 days. I'm willing to come and be with you for 4 days. If it doesn't work, I'm going to kill myself. I'm telling you that right up front. And I said,
no pressure.
Great. Come on up. I was actually very excited because I have so much confidence that she has innate well-being. And as she learns that, it's going to change your life. And as she learns she's a thinker, she's going to be shocked at how much she's caught up in thinking and giving it meaning, making it true, and acting on it. And as that awareness increases, higher level of consciousness, automatically she'll have more well-being. I was very confident in that, Jay. So she comes up, and we really had a good time. We laughed a lot, and I'd say, right now you're not depressed, are you? And she says, oh yes, no, I'm still depressed. and I'd say, no, it's our experience is moment to moment. Right? And our thinking can change, and when it does, we have different feelings. And that's always been true and will be true for you, like me, like anybody else. And I just talked to her that way, just down to earth, and we'd joke around and had a lot of fun. And the whole time she's going, Dicken, I'm still depressed. This isn't working. I'm still depressed. I don't think this could work for someone who has depression like me. So anyways, at the end of 4 days, she left. And I could see she was lighter than when she came in. I could see during those 4 days, I could literally see her having insights where she would just stop and go, I hadn't realized that. I say, well, that's an insight. You just had an insight. And that's how people change. They don't change from information, they change from insights. And they're not my insights, they're her insights. So her own insights, her own wisdom brings her new thinking that changes her. We set up to have a phone call 5 days later, a follow-up, because I was doing a whole series of follow-up calls with her after our 4-day intensive. Say she was supposed to call at 2 o'clock. And at 5 after 2, she hadn't called. 10 after 2, she hadn't called. 2:15, she hadn't called. I start having some thoughts. I wonder if she's still around.
Exactly.
Maybe I'm starting to have some insecure thoughts, and I'm feeling it. Let me tell you. And then the phone rings at 20 after. She says, "Oh, I'm so sorry I didn't call. I lost all track of time. I've been looking forward to talking to you." And I said, "Well, how's things going?" She says, "Well, I'm still depressed, probably 90% of the time." She says, "But 2 things have changed." I said, "What's that?" She says, "Deep down inside me, I feel like somebody's laughing." See, that's what hope sounds like. That's a metaphor in my mind. She was, for the first time, hopeful that she could change, because she was becoming more aware of the fact that it's moment to moment, that it's just her thinking that's creating her experience, not her biochemistry, not her past, not her personality, not all these things out of her control. And then she said, I probably have 5 minutes a day when I feel good, because you've helped me see that it comes and goes. And well, I have about 5 minutes. And I also learned from you the best time to make a decision is when you have openness and clarity. Don't bother trying to make a decision when you're all depressed and upset and worried, and you can't analyze your way to creative thought, to new thinking, or to insights. It's when people stop analyzing that they get new thinking. So I had gone over that with her quite a bit. So she said, Dicken, every day for 5 minutes, I'm wide open to what feels right and makes sense, to my own wisdom. And I'm making these great decisions, and I'm feeling great about the decisions I've been making, because she had a lot of decisions to make. Big decisions. Can I keep living here if I'm not making any money? Where do I go? What do I do? If I can't work as a fireman anymore, what kind of job can I have? She had a lot of decisions to make, and she'd make a whole bunch of them during those 5-minute windows every day, and was feeling more and more proud of herself for making good decisions. So we had a series of follow-up calls, and she's basically saying, I'm still depressed, but I'm feeling better able to deal with my life. That's how she said it. 6 months later, I saw her at a conference. It was actually at a Sid Banks talk, the guy I was telling you about. She comes up to me, stands right in front of me, after she gives me a big hug, and she goes, 50%, and walks away. Oh! Tears were coming down my cheeks. She was there with her mom. 6 months after that, she was at another Sid Banks talk that I was at. She comes up to me and said, it's gone. I can honestly say I don't feel depressed. I'm not depressed. Everything in my life is going well right now. That has nothing to do with me, and everything to do with the capacity each one of us has to have insights about what's true. It is true that every human being is a thinker. It is true that behind all of that thinking, everybody is a clear, aware presence. What some people call the now, what some people call our soul. It is true that there's a deeper intelligence than our IQ, than our computer, that can bring us healing, creativity, boundless, unconditional love that's available to every one of us. No matter where I go in the world, I can say, we all think, we're all conscious beings, and we all have a mind which is far greater than we had imagined. I get no argument, because those are fundamental truths or principles for all human beings. And we've never had that in psychology before. It's a massive breakthrough in the field of psychology. The father of American psychology, William James, said, if we ever discover the fundamental principles in psychology, it will be a discovery more significant than the discovery of fire. And in my mind now, when I go to a conference on the three principles in London, and there's 24 countries represented and over 1,000 people, and how it's spreading like wildfire through the world because it's such a hopeful message. It's a universal message that it can be given to any person anywhere and resonate as making sense.
What I'd like to do is do another plug on this book that you co-authored with Natasha called Coming Home. And you know, it's an easy read. If you have a tough time reading, if you're one of those people that kind of get lost and you have to reread the same sentence 3 times, you've made it easy for those type of people. It's a simple, quick book. It's not that thick. It's big text.
Good.
Book may just change your life.
Yeah.
I highly suggest that you buy it. that you invest in yourself. If you read this book, you may just come home. It may at least open a gateway, be the gateway to a greater understanding of how you can walk through life today with a different perspective than prior to having read it. Where can they buy this book, Dicken, and where can people get hold of you?
Well, it's printed by Amazon, so it's easiest to get it through Amazon if you can. Otherwise, you could have your local bookstore order it for you. I like to support independent bookstores, so you can have your favorite independent bookstore order it. I put my plug in for independent bookstores.
You got a few of them up in the Northwest where I know you call home these days.
We sure do. We sure do.
So the subtitle is Uncovering the Foundations of Psychological Well-Being. Now, who doesn't want that? We all want to be well.
Yeah.
We all want to feel good. We just have a difficult time finding our way there or knowing how to achieve that. We're almost out of time, Dicken.
Man.
There's so much more I wanted to cover.
Oh man.
You know what that means? That means I'd like to have you back on, because the two areas that I'd really like to dive in with you next time. One is on relationships. I mentioned early on that 1969, you've been married 49 years to the same beautiful bride. And I'd really love to hear how the three principles changed your relationship with your wife, because you were married prior and you married post, and also how it changed the relationships with your children, your grandchildren. I know you've got 2 children, 3 grandchildren, and relatives and friends, everyone in your life that you touch. I'd love to hear about that. You mentioned the word soul once, I believe, in our conversation today. I really like to spend some time looking at that a little bit about.
It's my favorite subject. Oh, are you kidding? It's what Sid Banks called pure consciousness. Pure consciousness. Our very essence. He says that's what every human being in the world is looking for, whether they know it or not. Because when we touch that space inside of us, beyond the contamination of our conceptual mind, when we touch that purity because it's unstained by concepts or beliefs, that's where we will find everything we're looking for. Hope, love, creativity, inspiration, aspiration, motivation, peace, happiness, contentment. Anything people are really looking for, that's where they'll find it, which is why the wise for centuries have said, look within. It just means, within means beyond anything we can conceive, beyond our concepts, into the true now. So I'd love, are you kidding? That's my favorite. I'd love to. That's going deeply into the principle of consciousness.
So before we kick out, where can they reach you? What is your website? Whether through a website or Facebook, what's the best way to get hold of you if they want to talk to you, learn more about three principles, learn more about the services you can provide?
I have a website, the number 3 principles mentoring.com, 3principlesmentoring.com. And if you get interested in Sydney Banks, there's a new website with free videos, maybe 12 half-hour videos of Sid's talking about the principles. This welder from Scotland who, oh man, he was my teacher for 23 years before he died. It's called Sid Banks, B-A-N-K. And it's the people that published his books and tapes and videos decided it was time to make them available for free to anybody who is interested.
So that's sidbanks.com?
Sidbanks.com.
Okay.
Yes. Highly
And
recommend.
on YouTube, if you do a search for either Sydney Banks or Dicken Bettinger, Natasha, there's a couple of other big people in that actually have a lot of free YouTube discussions, topics ranging like what we just talked about today, and others that kind of go a little bit deeper into the understanding of the three principles.
A lot of free material is available on a group that I'm on the board of called 3pgc.org. 3pgc.org, Three Principles Global Community. 3pgc.org. They have lots of free stuff and videos, and
that's where I jump on
topics.
Yeah. I jump on there quite often. Yeah. So, my friend, you know, it's always hard to say goodbye because I just love these conversations we get to have. If you were to share some parting words, Jeremy Melton jumping on, peace and love, thank you, coming back from, where are we from this evening? If anyone can share, I know Jeremy's back from Pennsylvania. John Harrison, I know we had in from Atlanta, Georgia area. Nice. Melinda Phillips, not sure where you're from. Dora, feel free to just hit us up, let us know in the comments where you've come in live from tonight. Helen, thank you so much. Helen says, so helpful, so radical, but such common sense.
Yes. Yes.
I'm giving you a few minutes as I'm looking at some of these comments. Mary says, hope, love, peace, happiness, contentment. Mary says we need a 2-hour show, or we just have 2 1-hour shows. It looks
yeah.
So, any parting words of consciousness or wisdom that you'd like to share with us live?
2 things. It's all thought, and fall. When you feel tension, stress, or upset, don't keep thinking. Fall open, and you'll begin to, at some point when you're just open and back in the now, which is the only place you'll find well-being. You can only find well-being in the now. When you have a nicer feeling, trust what occurs to you then, because that's coming from your wisdom. That's your common sense. That's what will guide you.
My spiritual mentor refers to it as a signpost. You know, the signpost are the messages. You know, for me to break that down, what that means to me is there are so many signposts that I potentially miss on any given day. Because I'm just not paying attention. I'm just so focused on what I'm thinking.
Yeah, me too.
That I'm missing what is truly important, which is coming from within. He refers to it as a signpost. He referred to it as the pure consciousness. It's all coming from within our souls. And when we miss it, we have to keep receiving something very similar until we finally get it. Some of us, it takes a lifetime. Some of us, we find a shortcut to get there. But Dicken, thank you so much for joining us this evening. I've enjoyed our conversation. I look forward to the next time you join Real Men, Real Talk. You're welcome to stay on just for a few moments, or you could head on out if you got somewhere to be. I just would like to share a few closing thoughts and comments. Last week, I closed out the show after I had Jeff Fasano on, and I got so emotional at the end. And it was just, I was so taken by the conversation we had, and it just hit me in my soul, you know, it just hit so hard that I had a hard time closing out. And it's okay, because, you know, through being able to have those emotions and be able to express them, even as raw as they may be, but they are authentic. And I was coming from a pure place of just total love and appreciation for for the triumphs that he's experienced in his life, as well as some of the recent pain that he experienced in a very dear friend of his that took his own life about a week earlier. And so I wanted to put that out there. I also would like to just share that this show is about real men, real talk, sharing their experiences, sharing their truths, sharing their authenticity, their masculine as well as their feminine vulnerability, to have a space and a place where we can come, we can have these conversations, and we can talk about the things that have impacted our lives, the experiences that have improved our relationships, the experiences that have taught us how to come home to ourselves, as Dicken has so profoundly spoken in his book. And I was asked, it was suggested that I invite on this show a female guest. And although it felt uncomfortable to me because it's real men, real talk, raw, I have listened to my guest next week, who's going to be my first female guest. I'd like to say that it's going to be a special occurrence. It's not going to be a typical occurrence, but when the opportunity arises for a woman to come on that I believe has something very powerful to share with the community, with the men that join us, as well as the women that join us on the show, we're going to have them on. So next week, I'm excited to have on Jessica Ahlstrom, who is a powerhouse. She is a woman that just has come a long way in her own journey, and she's going to share her own experience, her life, the wisdom, the knowledge, the consciousness, the mindfulness that she has embraced, and how she lives her life today. So I'm excited to have Jessica. Next show is going to be on Sunday. It's not going to be Friday night. I'll have some marketing pieces up on Facebook during the week. Other than that, have a beautiful weekend. No matter what you do, no matter what you have planned, no matter how long your to-do list is, please take some time for you. Do some self-care. Take some time to slow down and do some things that bring you some joy, some inner peace, that bring you some love, and just have an absolutely beautiful weekend. And with that, we're out. Dicken, thanks again for joining us this weekend.
Thanks.
Take care.
Thanks.
We'll see you next time.